Hi there folks, and welcome to another one of these last pass tutorials I'm going to do for Grand Tactician, the Civil War. The first pass is generally about 2.5 years out of date. The game has changed. I would change the way I presented some of that stuff, and so with it apparently at the end of its development, certainly as battles go, I think that this is the right time. We still do have folks who are new and coming to this game, and there is that learning curve. The one thing you can do to help others is to hit the like button if indeed you actually found the material useful. It's a small channel, and YouTube's algorithm will generally push this out to more folks who are looking for similar content. And for those of you Grand Tactician grog nerds, if you have different views, if you have advice, comments, if you put it in the comment section, it will be there for all those new folks who are coming to the game, and they'll be able to kind of get a one-stop shop from whatever you're able to contribute. So without any further ado, I'm going to go hop on in and deliver today's lesson. In this video, I'm going to be covering all of the UI elements, pretty much what is all this information that's being thrown at me, and we'll wrestle with other topics like deployment, movement, infantry tactics, and so on in future tutorials. All right, so some of the basics, maybe the most basic thing is kind of, what is going on here. If you notice, as the CSA will always have red as its marker, and the Union will always be blue, regardless of what side you're actually playing. The red shapes here tell you the deployment zone. You can move an army in deployment anywhere you want inside that. You can't deploy outside of it. The top left up here, you have basically it's your messages. This happens a lot that you just pontoons already. You don't really need to know too much of that. You can mark them all as red. If you ever want to see, usually the messages are now going to come up with the this will take you to the location of that event. So if you want to see, okay, well, which pontoon, or later on when you get more important messages like reinforcements have arrived, you can just click on the message and then click on the arrow that will take you right to that. Speaking of reinforcements, the map will tell you the possible places if you're going to have reinforcements that they may enter. All along the map edge, sometimes they're hard to see because they're white, but other times they're either going to be blue or red. That tells you the place of possible reinforcements to enter. They'll be on maps in campaign even when you don't have reinforcements. But this is a possible spot, this is a possible spot, this is a possible spot, all for the CSA. Right now, I should mention there have been some patches to Grand Tactician, and so some of the things in maps are bugged out at the moment. You'll see some of it if you haven't caught it already, but that's where reinforcements might enter the map. The top bit here kind of tells you how things are going. So the more blue it is, the more likely it is a Union victory, and then they'll give you a kind of qualitative minor victory versus major victory. And then this little indicator right here, it'll slide as the battle goes on. There are these little, they look like shields to me. And what they're telling you, it will fill up as you capture victory points. So on this map, and you can see them on the map here, there's this one, it's a 5-pointer. And so if your victory points are on continuous, whoever is holding that point, they will accumulate victory points throughout the battle. Tells you where it is, tells you the date. If it's a multi-day battle, it's going to tell you there. You get a weather report here by hovering over this, and this tells you, basically this is giving you the shorthand for, do you hold enough victory points to kind of win just by holding the ground? And there are 3 of these. There's this one, then there are, if you have to attack, say the role was reversed, then there would be 3 arrows kind of pointing straight ahead. And then if there are 2 arrows pointing at one another, that's a meeting engagement. And that tells you, usually in campaign, when I get that one, there's 1 victory point, both sides start in deployment, but neither has actually captured the victory point. So that's what that's telling you. Over here on the right, there is a lot. The main menu, you can figure out what that does, right? This is, so the tools one here, this is important, and this will toggle on or off a number of things. So we have this Greg's Brigade right here. The teal shape you see here that's their range, right? Again, it looks kind of bugged out based on how the unit's positioned. But anyways, this is where they're going to be able to shoot. So that's what that tells you. Icons, you can either play with them on or off. Routes, so we haven't given any orders yet, but you would be able to see those if we had given those. Command info, that's show hi command info. So again, who's ordering who and what around, and then whether you have Fog of War on or off. Now, if you've seen any of my recent campaigns, you know that I like to play with pretty much all of these things off. It's more aesthetically pleasing, but I think if you're new to the game, you're probably going to want most of these on. In particular, you're probably going to want to know who can see what, because where their view is obstructed, like if we see this, well, the Cav detachment doesn't really matter so much, but the Cav brigade has a very small field of fire, say, compared to Greg's brigade over here. And over here, despite all those trees being there, somehow the 5th Brigade is able to shoot all through that without any problem. So that's what you want to know from up here. That is how you get it to all go away, is by clicking that little thing right there, which now disappears. The field book, right, you can just click through here, and if there's anything you want to read, you just click on it and it'll show up. And your HQ reports. So there are actually 3, though right now in this patch, the middle one, you don't really see it as outlined until you hover over it, but this will tell you what your objectives are, pretty much the victory points, right? So Telegraph Road, it tells you who took it. So, all right, if we had to attack, it would kind of tell us what we still needed to do. This is usually more this color, but again, it's bugged out in this patch, but it kind of gives you an overview as to what is going on in the battle. So if you squint really hard, right, the supply state of our army is outstanding. 3 corps with approximately 62,500 men are still marching and will join you as reinforcements. And then if you want really detailed stuff, it's the consolidated morning report, and there are several tabs you click through up here, and they tell you different things. For the most part, I think you can ignore a lot of this and guess, unless you're just really interested in digging into that. I don't really ever read this. The 2 for me that matter are the consolidated strength report, and I look at aggregate last return to pretty much tell me what's the manpower difference on the field. And so right now we know we're outnumbered 2-1. Beyond that, I mean, it'll give you a breakdown as to kind of what you're up against. All right, fine. That's the way it is. If you notice that the numbers up here aren't totaling to 20,000, that's because there are a lot of reinforcements. How you find reinforcements is you click on Consolidated Condition Report. You click through the side you're eager to learn about. So this is how I do it. Army of New Jersey. Oh, I'm sorry. That showed me the Union for some reason when I clicked on the Confederacy. Army of Northern Virginia. And so if you have reinforcements, it tells you arriving in 4 hours, arriving in 2 hours, arriving in 16 hours. And the Army of the Potomac is the one that we see on the battlefield. So we can kind of plan for that. I would say that these are usually, it usually seems like these are kind of the earliest times they arrive, and it seems like they're usually a little bit later, but they're pretty close to what you see. And to make HQ go away, we go ahead and click on that. In the bottom right-hand corner where my cursor is now, it shows you the time of day. That's important to know. If you have reinforcements or the enemy does, and you're getting near the end of the day, you kind of simulate the nighttime session, and so that will cut a lot of hours off of reinforcement time. We'll talk about fortifications near the end, but pretty much the higher this number is, the more stuff you can build. And a lot of the stuff, the fortifications you can build, you can only do during deployment. And so deployment happens at the beginning of the battle and then following each evening before the next day. That's really what you need to know. If you want to make the game go faster, right now we're sitting in pause because we're in deployment, and so nothing moves in terms of time. And then if you want to change the speeds, that's all down here. So now we're going to take a closer look at our army and kind of get a sense as to how the different parts come together. One thing to take note of is that down here in the bottom, well, it's in the center here, but it's the leftmost part of that. It says orders of battle, and it does give you, this is a later, right? You can read almost the end of 63. And so we have a fairly large army. McLaws is the leader of this army. There are several core. Beauregard's is called the army because it started as an army. But this is basically the core level of command. And then you have your divisions, and then you have your brigades within those divisions. And this is how I chose to set up my order of battle. There are different ways. But we know in this battle from reading the report, it's the other core here of McLaw's armies that we should expect as reinforcements. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the stuff down here is bugged out. So we're going to take a look at fortifications here if we think we're going to defend, but it's actually not appearing now until we hover over it. What's nice about the deployment phase is that movement is pretty generous. You can just drag and drop armies anywhere inside of your red bubble, whatever shape you end up having. If we look at the hierarchy that we just saw in the OOB, so this is McLaws, right? The army commander. Beauregard is the equivalent of the corps commander, and we can now see the lines to two of his division commanders, Johnston and I don't know if it's Hebert or Hebert, but anyways, Hardy is also he's technically a division commander. He only has Adams under him as a brigade. I've already gone ahead and detached him though, and so he does not show up. You do not see a solid red line there from Beauregard to Hardy, because Hardy is going to be off operating on his own. Why these red lines matter? Well, first of all, it just reminds you of the chain of command. When you click on any of these HQs, they kind of look, I don't know, kind of looks like an envelope to me, but they're headquarters. You'll notice that there's this circle with the, well, it just tells you exactly what I was going to say. You're within bugle range. The basic idea there is that order delays are much shorter, and so we'll talk about order delays now within that area. So pretty much to get everything moving, as long as you're within the bugle area, things are moving very quickly. So you have the option to play either with order delays on or off. This really only applies if they are on. If they're off, pretty much orders that you give at whatever level are instantaneously carried out once you hit play. And so whether it's to a brigade or a division, they'll just start doing what you say. But if you play with order delays on, you got to pay a little bit more attention to your spacing of headquarters, and you want to try to keep the lines between headquarters as short as possible. What happens when they get long? So we'll move Johnston all the way up there, and we'll move Beauregard back here. Notice how faint that red line is, and it's showing that it's a weak line of connection. Really what it's telling you is it's going to take a while for orders to get from Beauregard to Johnston. Even if they move to McLaws to Beauregard quickly, and they can move relatively quickly to Hebert, it's going to take a while to get to Johnston. And then also notice on the back end of that Johnston's orders to his brigades is going to take a long time because he is away from them. So, and by the way, to just move the HQ during deployment, I hold left alt and then I'm right clicking. And so that's how you just zip them around. And notice now we have pretty nice, tight, dark red lines, relatively short distances between them. So if you're playing with order delays, it is it's a level of immersion. I personally prefer it. But it is one more thing to micromanage, and you do need to be cognizant of that. I mentioned that Hardy, you can actually see this very faint red dash line for Hardy from Beauregard. And what that signals is that Hardy was attached to Beauregard, but he is no longer. And the reason why you detach a unit, at least the reason I do it, is because you want it to operate without order delays, and so it's going to act faster on its initiative. Basically, it kind of instant gets whatever your orders are. And so I tend to do that a lot for Cav if I think they're going to be far from whatever the commander before them is. I've also detached, and this is a personal preference, my artillery, because I like to use division level macro. This is entirely up to you, but the way that those OOBs were set up is that each one of those, I'll say infantry divisions, had a battery assigned to them. But I've detached them because I think, well, we're going to deploy them a little bit differently, and I like to turn some of this over to the AI. And if you want more details about each of the forces under your command, right, this is McLaws. This is telling you everybody in his force that's here. So in parentheses is what's on the battlefield. What's outside of parentheses is the total number. Battle hasn't started, so we don't start with any losses. Guns, again, that's referring to artillery. Morale eager is that's a fine one. And these hearts here, they fill up red as you take casualties, and basically once you burn all the way to the end, then in this case the army would have routed. It likely would have done so before that, but it matters more for the individual brigades because it's going to tell you when that unit is going to break just from the casualties they suffered. And more veteran units get more of these hearts, so they can take more as time goes on. We click down to the corps level, and we can see, right, this is everything that the corps has. So there are 32 guns on the field, and we could find out specifically by clicking down who has what, right? We click on each of those batteries, or we could click on the divisions, and it will tell you the guns are still counted as part of those divisions, even though I have set them to an independent command. In all of these, we're going to get some information about who's in charge just by hovering over them. And so hovering over that portrait there, and then this would give you the information of Beauregard. I'm just going to say it's a corps. And for me, it matters a little bit more at the division level about what's going on. We get it's a lot of the same kind of information. If you hover over the stars, it just kind of tells you what those stars mean. And the most information you're going to get is at the brigade level, but it's also the least, right? Because you're only finding out about 2,800 men, but we know who's in charge. We know the total number of men, morale, and so now when you hover over it, you get a very detailed breakdown about what is going on with their morale. So 89 out of 100%, and it tells you the overall change per hour, kind of the last thing in that total, is the most important. That basically tells you is your morale going up or down, and then at the bottom it's telling you this unit's morale in that battle cannot go above 89%. It's capped by something called fighting spirit. So that's that. The Richmond rifle, I mean, if you want to know about any of the rifles, usually you just hover over it, and there it'll give you a description, tells you basic stuff, accuracy, range. You can read all that. Ammunition is important to know. As you drop down, you'll get warnings when your ammunition is about to run out. Even if ammunition says 0, you'll always continue firing. You just do so at a very, very slow pace. It tells you about the melee effectiveness of the unit. So that's that. If you have any cover, it will tell you what it is. It won't tell you how much it is. That's reported in the manual. But I think offense is around a 20% cover bonus. And then status is idle. Usually you would see idle, or you would see in combat. What you usually don't want to see is engaged, because engaged usually means your unit is getting shot, but they're not shooting back. And so that means either move backwards or move forwards, but it's generally, you don't want to be taking one-sided advantage. Situation, again, some things are bugged out, so you don't actually see all of them, but the green things mean that it's improving, and usually it's the morale situation. That's usually what this is going to tell you. And so if you hover over it, it tells you what's going on, usually. This is friendly cavalry. I can tell you that even if it doesn't pop up, that is what that is. And this is telling you that you are behind cover. If you were shooting at a unit that was behind cover, there would be a red, I'll say, fence-looking thing, and that's just telling you that that unit has some kind of cover. Cohesion, more cohesive is better. Fatigue, you would expect at the beginning of the battle is always going to be fine. But you do get units exhausted through doing a lot of stuff, and then the training is excellent, and that's what you hope to see. Right, the second last thing we'll talk about are some of the orders that you can give out through these headquarters, and you can also just give out to individual brigades. On McClaw's here, you can pick general AI stances if you want, and if you do that, pretty much wherever the army is, it's going to operate under that assumption. But if it hasn't made contact with the other side and you order it to assault, it's probably just going to sit there. And so you might have to give it assault as a general order. And what that means is that McClaws will then order Beauregard, who will order the units under his command, order the brigades, that they are to assault when they find the enemy or attack. Again, we're a little bugged out right now, so don't worry about that. So those are the general orders. You can order changes to the formation. So if you wanted to order us into marching column, you could do that. Single line. So the ones I like, I tend to like single line. I don't think I've ever used successive lines. Uh, this one is actually kind of cool. The refuse flank. That's not a bad one in a battle. I mean, if you were out here and you thought you were getting flanked, you could order the entire force to refuse that flank. Notice that it kind of does it, but actually the units I wanted to do it the most didn't actually do it. I don't know if we could order. Could we then order Beauregard to also refuse his right? So that actually worked better. You can tell it's not one I use, and it's not usually one you would ever use during deployment because you would just drop the units wherever you want. But if in the heat of things you want to order a kind of general refuse of the flank, I think those ones are okay as well. Uh, Square I've never used. Double line I rarely use. If you give, so at McClaw's level, I almost never order anything down here in infantry, cavalry, or artillery. I generally won't make blanket orders. Sometimes at the corps level, more likely at the division level, I'll maybe give some specific orders. It's entirely up to you, but if you wanted to order the entire, this would be the army, so right now it only applies to Beauregard, but you can choose the range at which you're going to fire. You can order them to lay down. You can order those who can kick out skirmishers to do so, or you can order them to charge. For cav units, cav requires, I think, quite a bit of finesse and the most micro, but you can order them to mount, dismount. When they're mounted, they're going to move faster. They're going to be able to shoot a bit further. There is an accuracy penalty as well to doing that, and they're more likely to take casualties. You can kick cav scouts out, or actually vedettes. Right here, I've done that. You can see them on the map. They're those little dots right there, and they pretty much they increase the line of sight for the unit, and so by extension for the army. Cold steel is just charge. I don't know why it's not just labeled what it is, but it's charge. Evade is one that when I'm scouting, I would put on. Mostly so that we just don't end up in melee if I accidentally go away and things get bad. If you're dismounted, you can lay down. If you're dismounted, you can also move to loose formation. We'll talk a lot about that in other videos. If you want to order it at that high level of command, you could. And then for artillery, it's actually a little bit more simple, and sometimes it makes more sense. But you could just order your artillery to target enemy artillery. You can give them a spot to bombard. And so I think again, when we get to tactics, if you're looking for maybe a flank overload and you want to soften that flank up, you could order bombardment, or fire at will is, they'll do whatever they can. And so those orders will persist on them. At lower levels, you could do things like order if you wanted to order a corps to detach, you could. If you're really far away from the commander and you can't get the commander close, maybe it makes sense. Detached units, though, do have a penalty. So for this basically brigade/cav division, they will experience they won't benefit from the commander's morale. And so that's also an issue when you detach brigades. So you can see right here, there's that red malice. So unit is cut off, and so it has detrimental effects for the unit. They're not huge, and so if you don't plan on being in really heavy combat, you should be fine with it, but just be aware that that is something that can happen. Most of the rest of these, I think makes sense. I mean, if you want to turn off AI initiative because you just don't want them to do anything, that's fine. If you really want to get into the microing of whether they use roads or not, that's fine. There's one here for high ground. I don't know why it's not using it. Using cover, I would generally say yes, use cover if high ground is available, for sure. When a unit breaks, you try to rally it, and in order for that to happen, you got to have the HQ pretty close, and I usually try to keep it within the bugle range. So you might have to micro and again, you do that by the left alt, you select it, and then you give a movement order, I believe right-clicking the HQ to a routing unit, and then you try to rally it. That's how that works. And we'll go over fortification construction in another tutorial. And then there are general movement orders as well. So if you don't forget to do this, I think particularly if you need to attack, double time, it should be pretty self-explanatory. The payoff is you move more quickly. The downside is you burn through your fatigue more quickly, and so your men will become fatigued faster. There are some units that have the ability to run, and so, well, right now that's cav, so it's not a great example, but skirmishers can run, as well as infantry brigades who have a particular perk. Then, if you want to do any of these shorthand, I would never recommend doing surrender. I would never recommend doing that. And if you want to order retreat because the battle is not going your way, and I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do, the button should show up when you need to do that, and then you just go ahead and click there. But I think unless things are going really bad, you don't want to be clicking on this button and accidentally do something. All right, the last thing I'm going to do in this video is just briefly show you things on the map just so you understand what you're looking at. All right, so this may be obvious to everyone, but if it isn't, it's okay. The green areas are areas of forest, and to zoom in, my hotkey at least is Y. To zoom out is X. Blue, as you would imagine, are streams. I don't know if we can find, I call them trails. I don't know if there's a different name for them, but you'll see them on other maps. They're basically very, very small roads. I'm not seeing any on this particular map. I mean, it is a more built-up area, so maybe all they have and they need are roads. These lines right here tell you that there's a fence, and so if you're planning out cover, you know that. It's hard to see the kind of cultivation marks that are here. I have to zoom in a ways in order to see them. A named building, and so we can pretty much figure that this is someone's farm here. And then you could probably tell by the name, but if you just see this, it's telling you that there is a railroad there. The rail line, I should say, is there, and unfinished as well as finished railroads are very good cover. And so you want to be able to know that. And then it's sometimes hard to see. You can kind of tell, even zoomed out this far, what the elevation is. And they do try to indicate that, but you sometimes have to just zoom in all the way, get down to almost man-size height there to see what's going on. And right, you could probably figure out that that's a built-up area. So I think that those are the major points about maps that we have not already covered. And I think that that's going to do it for this tutorial.